A deadly marriage. Victor was a man with one big dream. He wanted to be rich, but he did not want to work hard. He thought he was too smart for regular work. He wanted money, and he wanted it fast. Victor knew he was charming and good-looking. He knew people trusted him easily. So he came up with a plan. A dark and dangerous plan. Victor thought he could marry a rich woman, take her money, and then get rid of her. He would act like a loving husband, but inside, he would only be thinking about money. Victor felt no guilt. To him, people were just tools to get what he wanted. One day, Victor heard about a wealthy woman named Emma. She was kind and gentle, known for her kindness to others. She had recently inherited a large fortune from her family. Victor decided that Emma would be his next target. He thought she would be easy to fool. Victor dressed in his best suit and went to an event where he knew Emma would be. He introduced himself to her with a warm smile. He acted polite and caring, pretending to be interested in her life. Emma, who believed in love and honesty, was drawn to him. She thought he was a kind and trustworthy man. As they talked, Victor felt confident. He could see that Emma was starting to like him. He continued to charm her, listening carefully to everything she said. To Emma, Victor seemed like the perfect man. Little did she know he was planning something terrible. Victor was very pleased with how things were going. Emma liked him. She enjoyed his company, and she laughed at his jokes. She saw him as a kind, caring man. Victor knew she trusted him, and that was exactly what he wanted. Emma came from a wealthy family. Her father had been a successful businessman, and he left her a large inheritance when he passed away. But Emma was humble. She didn't show off her money. Instead, she spent her time helping others and doing charity work. She was kind-hearted and gentle, the type of person who believed in the goodness of others. Victor continued to charm Emma. He sent her flowers and took her to fancy dinners. Every time they were together, he was careful to say all the right things. He listened to her dreams and her hopes, pretending to care deeply. Emma believed every word he said. As the weeks went by, Emma started to fall in love with Victor. She saw him as someone who understood her, someone who cared about her. Her friends and family noticed her happiness. They saw how Victor treated her with attention and kindness, and they thought he was a good man. But not everyone was convinced. Some of Emma's close friends felt uneasy about Victor. They warned Emma to be careful. "He seems too perfect," they told her. "Be sure he is who he says he is." But Emma brushed off their concerns. She believed in true love, and she believed Victor loved her. One evening, as they walked together in a beautiful garden, Victor decided it was time to take the next step. He told Emma how much he cared for her. He spoke about his dreams of a future together, making her believe he was deeply in love. Then, Victor got down on one knee and took out a ring. "Emma," he said softly, "will you marry me?" Emma's eyes filled with tears of happiness. She didn't hesitate for a second. "Yes," she replied. She was overjoyed. She believed she had found her soulmate. Victor smiled, hiding his true feelings. He had done it. He had trapped Emma with his charm, and now she was his. Soon, He would have everything she owned. He was one step closer to his goal. The day of the wedding arrived. It was a bright, beautiful day, filled with excitement and joy. Emma looked stunning in her white dress. She felt like she was living in a fairy tale. Her family and friends were there, smiling and celebrating with her. Everyone was happy to see her so in love. Victor played his part perfectly. He stood at the altar, looking handsome and confident. He wore a gentle smile, making everyone believe he was a loving and devoted man. As he looked at Emma, he pretended to be filled with love. But in his mind, he was thinking only about her wealth. Soon, he would have everything she owned. The ceremony was beautiful. Emma walked down the aisle, her face glowing with happiness. When she reached Victor, he took her hand and looked deeply into her eyes. The guests watched them, believing they were a perfect couple. Victor spoke his vows with a steady voice. "I promise to love you, cherish you, and be with you forever," he said. Looking sincere, Emma believed every word. She was deeply in love, and she trusted him completely. After the ceremony, they held a grand reception. The room was filled with flowers, music, and laughter. Emma's family had spared no expense to make this day perfect. Emma was overjoyed. She danced with Victor, her heart full of happiness and hope. But Victor was already planning his next move. As he held her in his arms, he was thinking of how he would get rid of her. He knew he had to be careful. He didn't want anyone to suspect him. For now, he needed to play the role of the perfect husband. In the days that followed, Victor continued to act like a loving husband. He cooked for Emma, took her out, and made her feel special. Emma felt lucky. She believed she had found a man who would always stand by her. But slowly, Victor began to change. He became quieter and more distant. Sometimes he would sit alone, staring out the window. When Emma asked him what was wrong, he always had an excuse. "I'm just tired," he would say, or "I'm just thinking about work." Emma tried to ignore these changes. She told herself it was normal, that Victor was just adjusting to married life. She wanted to believe that he loved her as much as she loved him, but Victor was focused only on his plan. He started researching ways to make Emma's death look like an accident. He read about different methods and thought about every detail. He wanted to be sure no one would ever suspect him. Each day, he grew more cold-hearted. The love he pretended to have for Emma faded completely. To him, she was just a step on his path to riches. He was ready to do whatever it took to get what he wanted. Victor felt that the time had come. He was ready to put his dark plan into action. For weeks, he had been studying and preparing. He wanted to make sure everything would look like an accident. He knew he had to be careful, or he would risk losing everything. One evening, Victor decided to prepare a special dinner for Emma. He acted loving and thoughtful, telling her he wanted to do something nice for her. Emma smiled, happy to see him making an effort again. She had missed these moments with him and hoped it meant things were getting better. Victor cooked her favorite meal and set the table with flowers and candles. Emma was touched by the effort he had put into the evening. She thanked him and felt her love for him grow even stronger. To her, this dinner was a sign that their marriage would be happy and full of love. but Victor's mind was elsewhere. As he poured her a glass of wine, he added a few drops of a tasteless, slow-acting poison. He had chosen it carefully. He wanted something that would make her weak over time, so that it would look like she had fallen sick. Victor handed her the glass with a smile, hiding the darkness in his heart. Emma took a sip, smiling back at him. She had no idea of the danger she was in. They talked and laughed, with Emma feeling truly happy. But as they finished dinner, she began to feel strange. A wave of dizziness washed over her, and she placed her hand on her head, confused. "Are you feeling all right?" Victor asked, pretending to be concerned. I'm just feeling a bit lightheaded," Emma replied, her voice shaky. She thought maybe she was just tired, so she brushed it off, not wanting to worry him. Victor pretended to care, offering to help her to bed. He guided her gently, watching as she grew weaker. Emma believed he was being a loving husband, but in reality, Victor was pleased. His plan was working perfectly. Over the next few days, Emma's health continued to decline. She felt weak and often struggled to get out of bed. Victor stayed by her side, acting like the worried husband. He called the doctor, who couldn't find anything seriously wrong with her. Everyone thought it was a mysterious illness, but Victor knew exactly what was happening. Emma's family and friends visited, concerned for her health. They saw how Victor stayed by her side, caring for her, and they praised him for being such a devoted husband. No one suspected that he was the cause of her illness. They thought he was a loving, caring man, and they admired him for his loyalty. Victor played his part well. He comforted Emma, brought her food, and stayed by her side, all while hiding his true intentions. He knew he was close to getting what he wanted. Soon, Emma's wealth would be his, and he would finally be free of her. Emma tried to stay strong, but her body grew weaker each day. She didn't understand why she was feeling this way, and it frightened her. She held Victor's hand, finding comfort in his presence, not knowing he was the one causing her pain. As Emma lay in bed, she whispered to him, "Thank you for taking care of me. I don't know what I would do without you." Victor smiled, feeling no guilt. He told her he would always be there for her, hiding the truth behind his fake compassion. In his mind, he was already thinking about what he would do with her money once she was gone. Emma's health continued to worsen, and Victor prepared for the final step of his plan. Soon, he would be a wealthy man, free to live the life he had always wanted. To him, Emma was already a memory. With Emma's passing, Victor finally had what he wanted. He inherited her wealth, her home, and all her possessions. He acted heartbroken in front of her family and friends, attending the funeral with a sad face and offering words of comfort to everyone. But inside, he felt no sadness. Instead, he felt victorious. Emma's family was devastated. They couldn't believe she was gone. They cried and mourned, remembering her kindness, her smile, and the love she had for everyone. Victor stayed by their side, pretending to share in their sorrow. He listened to their stories about Emma and pretended to miss her. But all he could think about was his new fortune. After the funeral, Victor wasted no time. He sold some of Emma's belongings, moved to a new city, and started a new life. He lived in luxury, buying expensive suits, staying in high-end hotels, and dining in fancy restaurants. For a while, he enjoyed his new lifestyle, spending Emma's money without any regret. But as the months went by, Victor started to feel restless. The thrill of spending Emma's fortune began to fade. He wanted more. He missed the excitement of the chase, the feeling of tricking someone and winning their trust. He didn't care about the people he hurt. He cared only about the thrill and the reward. Soon, Victor began looking for a new target. He searched for another wealthy woman, someone who was kind, trusting, and easy to fool. He visited parties, events, and social gatherings, always on the lookout for his next victim. It didn't take long before he found her. Her name was Claire. She was a successful businesswoman, known for her generosity and her work with charities. Claire was well liked in her community, respected for her kindness and dedication. She was also single, with a sizable fortune that Victor knew he could claim. Victor approached Claire with his usual charm, introducing himself as a businessman. He dressed well, spoke politely, and showed interest in her life. Claire was impressed. She saw Victor as a man of character, someone who shared her interests and values. She liked his company and found herself looking forward to their conversations. Just like with Emma, Victor played the perfect gentleman. He listened to Claire, took her out to nice places, and made her feel special. Claire was touched by his attention and warmth. She believed he was a good, caring man, and her feelings for him grew with each day. Victor wasted no time. He quickly won her trust, knowing exactly what to say and how to act. Claire believed he was sincere, and soon she was deeply in love with him. Victor proposed after a few months, just like he had with Emma, and Claire, filled with happiness, said yes. They had a small, private wedding. Claire was overjoyed, feeling lucky to have found someone who understood her. But just like before, Victor felt nothing. To him, this was all part of the plan. He was simply following the steps that would lead him to her wealth. After the wedding, Victor began to distance himself from Claire. He acted cold, often making excuses to avoid spending time with her. Claire noticed the change but tried to ignore it, hoping he was just adjusting to their new life together. She trusted him completely, never suspecting his true intentions. Victor continued with his plan, just as he had done with Emma. He prepared the same poison, ready to use it when the time was right. Once again, he planned to make it look like an illness, so that no one would suspect him. He felt confident, thinking he would get away with it again. For Victor, it was a cycle. He would charm, marry, and take what he wanted, leaving a trail of broken lives behind him. He felt no guilt, no remorse. To him, it was just a game, and he intended to keep playing until he had all the wealth he desired. But Victor didn't realize that his greed would one day catch up with him. He believed he was clever, untouchable, and that no one would ever uncover his secrets. He was wrong. Victor continued his dark cycle without remorse, moving from one city to another, always in search of his next target. Each time, he would find a wealthy, trusting woman, charm her, marry her, and take her wealth. He left behind a series of tragedies, but he never looked back. To him, his actions were simply a means to an end. But one day, Victor met a woman who would change everything. Her name was Sarah, and she was different from his previous targets. Sarah was smart, strong, and independent. She had inherited a large fortune from her parents, but she was careful with her wealth. She didn't trust people easily, and she had learned to protect herself from those who wanted to take advantage of her. Victor first saw Sarah at a charity event. She was elegant, confident, and well-respected. People around her admired her intelligence and kindness. To Victor, she seemed perfect. Another wealthy woman who would fall for his charm. He approached her, introducing himself with a warm smile and a polite greeting. Sarah was polite, but she didn't seem as impressed by him as other women had been. She listened to him, but kept her distance. Victor noticed this, but he wasn't worried. He was patient and skilled, and he knew how to gain her trust. Over the next few weeks, he continued to pursue her, sending her flowers, calling her, and showing interest in her life. Slowly, Sarah began to let her guard down. She enjoyed Victor's company and found herself growing fond of him. He seemed attentive and caring, always asking about her day and offering support. Sarah began to think that maybe she had judged him too quickly, but unlike his other targets, Sarah was observant. She noticed small things about Victor that didn't quite add up. He seemed to avoid talking about his past, and he always changed the subject when she asked about his family or background. Sarah felt a bit uneasy, but she pushed her doubts aside, thinking she was being overly cautious. Victor proposed to her within a few months, just as he had with the others. He planned a romantic evening, taking her to a fancy restaurant and presenting her with a beautiful ring. Sarah was touched by the gesture. She felt he was sincere, and she accepted his proposal. They had a quiet, private wedding with only a few close friends. Victor, as always, played the part of the loving husband. He smiled, held Sarah's hand, and promised to be with her forever. Sarah was happy, but she couldn't shake the strange feeling she had about him. As they settled into married life, Sarah began to notice more unusual behavior from Victor. He was often secretive, spending long hours away from home and making excuses when she asked him where he had been. She found him staring off into the distance, lost in thought, and when she tried to talk to him about it, he would brush her off with a quick answer. Sarah's suspicions grew. She began to wonder if there was something he was hiding. One day, while he was out, she decided to look through his belongings. She found old photos and letters from his previous marriages, each one with a different woman who had passed away. The more she uncovered, the more horrified she became. Sarah realized that Victor had a dark past. She discovered records of his previous wives, all of whom had died shortly after marrying him. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Victor was not who he said he was. He was a dangerous man who preyed on wealthy women. Determined to expose him, Sarah gathered as much evidence as she could. She knew she had to act carefully, or Victor might try to harm her too. She quietly took copies of everything she found and contacted the authorities. She told them about Victor's suspicious history and provided the evidence she had collected. Victor noticed that Sarah was acting distant, but he didn't suspect anything. He thought she was simply busy with her work. Little did he know, she was preparing to bring him to justice. One evening, Sarah confronted Victor. She looked him in the eyes and told him that she knew everything. Victor tried to deny it, but he saw the determination in her eyes. She wasn't afraid of him, and she had the truth on her side. At that moment, Victor realized he had made a mistake. He had underestimated Sarah, thinking she would be as easy to fool as the others. But she was smarter and braver than he had expected. Before he could react, the police arrived, taking him into custody. His secret life was finally exposed, and he could no longer hide behind his charm. Sarah's courage had put an end to his cycle of greed and deceit. Victor sat in a cold, dimly lit cell, his hands cuffed tightly. The police had arrested him, and he knew there was no escaping this time. His mind raced as he thought of all the wealth, comfort, and luxury he was about to lose. For years, he had lived a life of lies, fooling everyone he met. But now, his greed and deceit had caught up with him. Sarah's evidence was strong. She had provided the police with records of his marriages, information about the mysterious deaths of his previous wives, and copies of the documents she had found. Each piece of evidence painted a dark picture of his past. The police were stunned. They couldn't believe that a man who seemed so charming and respectable had done such terrible things. The news of Victor's arrest spread quickly. Reporters wrote about him in newspapers, calling him a cold-hearted killer and a man driven by greed. People were horrified as they learned about the way he had preyed on innocent women, taking their lives for the sake of wealth. His story became infamous, and soon everyone in the city knew his name. As he waited for his trial, Victor realized he was truly alone. The wealth he had taken was gone, his reputation was destroyed, and there was no one left to help him. He thought about all the people he had betrayed, Emma, Claire, and all the other women he had used for their money. For the first time, he felt the weight of his actions. He was no longer the clever, untouchable man he had once believed himself to be. The day of the trial finally arrived. The courtroom was filled with people, reporters, lawyers, family members of the victims, and curious onlookers. Sarah was there too, sitting calmly in the audience. She watched as Victor was brought into the courtroom, his face pale and his expression full of fear. He avoided her gaze, knowing she had been the one to uncover his dark secrets. The prosecutor presented a powerful case. He spoke about Victor's history, his pattern of marrying wealthy women, and the tragic accidents that followed each marriage. He explained how Victor had hidden his true motives, using his charm to deceive everyone around him. With each word, the truth about Victor became clearer to everyone in the room. The families of Victor's victims gave emotional testimonies, speaking about the pain of losing their loved ones. Emma's parents cried as they described their kind and gentle daughter, who had trusted Victor and paid with her life. Claire's brother spoke about his sister's generosity and how Victor had taken advantage of her. Each testimony was a reminder of the lives he had shattered. When it was Sarah's turn to speak, she stood up confidently. She told the court about her suspicions, how she had uncovered the truth, and how she had gathered the evidence to bring him to justice. Her voice was steady, but there was a deep sadness in her eyes. She had once cared for Victor, but now she saw him for who he truly was, a man consumed by greed and darkness. The jury listened intently, their faces showing shock and disgust as they heard the details of Victor's crimes. They deliberated for only a short time before reaching a verdict. Victor was found guilty on all charges. The judge sentenced him to life in prison, with no possibility of parole. He would spend the rest of his days behind bars, paying for the lives he had taken and the pain he had caused. As the judge read the sentence, Victor felt a wave of despair. He knew there was no way out. His life of lies had ended, and all that remained was a future filled with regret and loneliness. After the trial, Sarah left the courtroom feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. She had done the right thing, but the experience had changed her. She had seen the darkness that could hide behind a charming smile, and she knew she would never forget the lesson she had learned. The story of Victor Caldwell became a warning to others. People talked about him, sharing his tale as a reminder of the dangers of greed and deceit. They spoke of the women who had trusted him, and the bravery of Sarah, who had risked everything to stop him. In the end, justice had been served. Victor's life of greed and deceit had led to his downfall, and he would spend the rest of his days facing the consequences of his actions. His story served as a reminder that, no matter how clever a person may think they are, the truth will always find a way to come to light.